after Islam. So some people, they believe that the relation that just when the Arabs, they came to Egypt, no, that started a long time ago, more than 2,500 years before the birth of Prophet Muhammad. That dates back to the time of Prophet Abraham. Abraham, he was living during the 19th century BC. So we talk about 2,500 BC. Abraham, he came to Egypt with his wife, Sarah, and his nephew, Prophet Lut. So they came to Egypt and they lived for a while. And according to some traditions, that they lived in Egypt about 20 years. So the Pharaoh of Egypt of that time, we don't know his name, he gave the Prophet Abraham an Egyptian young girl. She's called Hagar. And then Sarah, she was his wife, and she was sterile. She became 80 years old and without giving a child for Prophet Abraham. So she proposed to Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, to marry the young Egyptian girl. So the young Egyptian girl gave Prophet Abraham, the Egyptian girl, gave Prophet Abraham a son, his elder son Ishmael, who is considered to be the father of all the Arabs. So by this way, Hagar, she was the mother of the Arabs. The Egyptian wife of Prophet Abraham, she was the mother of all the Arabs. So the historians, they say that by this close relation, the Egyptians, they became the uncles of the Arabs. So this is the very old beginning between the Arabs and the Egyptian. After that, before the Arabs, they came to Egypt, or the Muslim army, Prophet Muhammad, he sent a companion of him. He's called Hatib ibn Abi Balta. He came to Egypt with a message to the king of Egypt of that time, was called Cyrus, or Al-Muqawqis, who was the Roman king of Egypt during that time. He had a message to call him to Islam. So Cyrus, he welcomed the companion, and he gave him another Egyptian young girl. She's called Mary the Copt, and with her sister and with other stuff. So Prophet Muhammad, he married another Egyptian woman. She's called Mary, and she gave him Abraham as a son. And she was the only woman, was Khadija. She was the first wife, Prophet Muhammad. The two only women that they gave Prophet Muhammad children. So she was the mother of Abraham. And then, Prophet Muhammad, he recommended the Egyptian to have the special treatment with Egyptians, because they have Zimma and Rahim, as it is mentioned on the traditional prophet. So this is a very important relation about the original or the origin between the Arabs and the Egyptians before the arrival of the Muslim army to Egypt.
Now we want to speak about the arrival of the Muslim army to Egypt. Amr ibn al-As was the commander of the army that came to Egypt in order to begin Islam. Could you tell us a bit more about this and his life?
Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab was the second Orthodox Caliph. He was in Palestine during that time. And Amr ibn al-As, he was a very special leader at that time. So he proposed to him to come to Egypt, or to go to Egypt, in order to join Egypt to the Islamic dynasty. So Amr ibn al-As, he knew so much about the value of Egypt, because he came to Egypt before Islam as a tradesman and for the treatment. So he knows the wealth of Egypt. And according to the historians, they say that Amr ibn al-As, when he came to Egypt for the first time, he said that I have never saw such a country like Egypt. So he knows so much the country and the power that could Egypt give to the Muslims in that time. So after long hesitation, the Caliph Umar, he gave him his acceptance, and he gave him 4,000 soldiers in order to come to Egypt. During their way to Egypt, because the Caliph was not so sure of that decision, he sent him another messenger with a message telling him, if you are not arriving to the borders of Egypt, get the army and go back. And if you cross the borders of Egypt, so go ahead with the blessing of God. So Amr ibn al-As, when he found the messenger, he was before the borders of Egypt. So he's a very smart man. He knows what is on the mind of the Caliph. So he did not stop to get his message. He continues till he crossed the borders of Egypt, and he went to Al-Arish, and then he called the messenger of the Caliph, come on and give me your message. Then he read the message to all the people with him. He's telling that the Caliph is telling you, if you cross the borders of Egypt, so go ahead. And then he continues to go to Egypt. After that was the first resistance of the Roman army for him, it was in Farama. Farama now it is Pelusium in old times, and now it is in Borside. Okay, it's closer to the Suez Canal. Then it was a long resistance with the Roman army, and then the Muslim army beat them, and then they crossed to the east of Delta, and then they went to Bilbais. After that, another Roman resistance, and then they approached to the Roman fortress of Babylon. Babylon now it is in the old city. Very famous towers, Roman towers that they date back to the time of Roman Emperor Trajan. So it was a long siege there. The Islamic or the Muslim armies or the soldiers of the Muslims, they were all around the fortress for several months. What we don't know, and what lots of people didn't know, that the Copts of Egypt during that time, they supported the Muslims when they came to Egypt, and they gave them the supply, they gave them the support against the Romans. Even though the Romans, they were Christians like the Copts. So it's very strange. Why that? At that time also, the patriarch of the Copts was called Benjamin. He was fled, or he fled on the desert because of the Roman persecution. Because that the Romans, they were very violent with them. They persecuted the Copts of Egypt, or the Christians, because of the difference of the sects. So there are differences between both of them, so they persecuted them. For that reason, the Copts of Egypt, they hated the Romans, and they want to get rid of them by any way. So when they saw the army or the Muslim army came to Egypt, they supported them against the Romans. So for that, it was one of the main reasons of the success of Egyptian or the Muslim conquest to Egypt during that time. This because of the support of the Copts to the Muslims.
This brings me to my next question. I know that Egypt was called the Coptic Egypt.
Yes.
So how did this change? I mean, historically, how did this the name change from being the name of a country to naming a certain faction of society?
For the names of Egypt, we have different names for that, according to the time. Misr now, this is the Arabic name of Egypt. It said that came from the name of Misraim, or Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, who was the grandson of Prophet Noah. Grandson. He was the Mitzrayim, son of Ham, son of Noah, who came to Egypt, and by his name, Egyptians, they were called Mitzrayim. So this is for the first name. Another name, it was Het-Kaptah. Het-Kaptah was also an old name of Egyptians during the Pharaonic time, before the coming of the Greeks to Egypt. It was a name of very famous temple of God Betah in Memphis. So when the Greeks, they came to Egypt, they pronounced the word Het-Kaptah to be I-Coptos. So from I-Coptos, this is the actual name of Egypt in Greek. So I-Coptos, and then I-Copti, or Copti, it means the Egyptian as the Greek word. So the word Copt was used before the Christianity, or before Egypt was converted to Christianity. So it was an older name before the religion. So Copti, it means absolutely, or the absolute meaning of it, Egyptian. It does not mean a religion. But when Egypt was converted to Christianity during the Roman time, so Copti, it means Christians of Egypt of that time. So it is an older tradition of that, but the origin of the word, it was that Copti as Egyptian. So me, I'm a Muslim Copti, or Copti Muslim. A friend of mine, he is a Christian Copti. So something like that.
Right. Dr. Hamid, back to the Muslim conquest and the spreading of Islam in Egypt. How did the Muslims treat the people of the nations that they conquered, not just Egypt, but in general, after their arrival?
Yes. Also, there is something I should say on this point. Some people, they imagine that the Muslims or Islam was spreading elsewhere or wherever by the sword. This is a point of what you say about. So this is a fully dangerous mistake that was used by Orientalists. European Orientalists, they don't understand that. What happens? The fighting, or the order of fighting the enemies in Islam, it was started, or it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad during the 2nd year after immigration from Mecca to Medina. So the whole message of Prophet Muhammad was about 23 years. 13 years it was in Mecca, and then 10 years in Medina. So in Mecca there is no fighting the Muslims, they did not fight with anyone, even with their enemies, with their disbelievers, even that they were persecuted by them. They were tortured, but they did not raise the sword against them during the time of Mecca. When they went to Medina, so 2 years, and then the order to fight the enemies just to defend themselves, it was after 15 years of the beginning of Islam. So 15 years without raising the sword, though that Islam was spreading in whole the Arab Peninsula. All the Arab tribes, they know about Islam, and lots of these tribes, they were converted to Islam. So this because of the morals of the religion, because of the principles. This is the same way that was used also after that when the Arabs, they came to Egypt. Egypt was occupied by the Romans. So the Muslims, when they came, they were fighting the Romans that they were occupying Egypt. Okay? So for that, they treated with the Christians by a very special way. The patriarch was fled on the desert, Benjamin. Amr ibn al-As, who became the ruler of Egypt after that, he called him and he came back as the patriarch of the Christians. They gave them all the rights to have a free religion or to have the practice their religion by free ways, without any discrimination. Maybe some exceptions that happened during the history could be happened. This normal by the human nature or the human feeling. But in general, on the whole time, it was a very special treatment, because in Islam there is an order. In Quran there is no obligation in religion. You have your religion, I have my religion. So all of us free to have what you want to do. So this in general.
So it gives us some information about how Islam entered Egypt, and it was, as you said, it was mostly peaceful. Dr. Ismail Hamid, a prominent historian, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for the beneficial discussion.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I guess with that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up this edition of The Breakfast Show. We hope you've enjoyed it. We had 2 very interesting segments, plus our usual features and stories. I was in the company of Reem Noor. Thank you very much, Reem.
Thank you, Angie. It was a pleasure.
It was indeed. And to all our viewers, a very good morning.